This is kind of an impromptu rant type video, but this article came out on Bloomberg and Yahoo Finance about Amazon Game Studios' continued failure, and I just thought it was really interesting. So let me get into this. So you might be asking, what even is Amazon Game Studio? Well, AGS began as Amazon's mobile game developer, primarily pushing apps for like the Apple, not Apple, the Amazon Fire phone and TV and stuff like that, which makes sense because mobile games are a pretty low risk, low reward endeavor, which have the potential to be a low risk, astronomical reward venture. This all changed around 2014 when they acquired Twitch. So, from a business perspective, Twitch makes a lot of money streaming. People streaming games and all that, big numbers. However, there is something to which is understandably maybe not desirable, which is that Twitch's content relies on products that are not made by Twitch. All the games are made by other studios, other companies. They're purchased on storefronts that are not associated with Amazon or Twitch. And so it makes a lot of sense to now want to develop. What if you could develop your own games for Twitch? Because now you're building your own brand in a similar way that they do to their Amazon Prime TV shows and stuff like that. They're Amazon originals, because now you're offering a unique product that, for instance, YouTube Live can't, because, well, YouTube Live doesn't have the Amazon games. You can't stream those on there. Now, in making this transition, they have also made every rookie mistake in the book. Now, maybe not everyone, but many that could be avoided if their leadership, which is namely one Mike Frazzini, who comes up many times in this article, knew anything about the industry. He got his start in the books section of Amazon, and was apparently the one who really pushed the initiative for the AGS to form and to put out games, and why we're all in this. Well, why all the people working there are in this. Now, this is interesting to me because it's not very often that you see a company not previously associated with games going into the industry. You did see in the earlier days companies like Nintendo or Konami either transitioning into gaming or what would you call it? Integrating gaming into their business. But the last real example of anything kind of close to that would be like Microsoft, and even Microsoft had closer ties when they went into console gaming with the industry, because they had previously published. Well, for one, they are a computer technology company. They had previously published games like the Age of Empires, and they already had they were responsible for DirectX. So there is a precedent, or it makes sense that they might want to go transition into doing gaming, at least as part of their business. Amazon is weird because they previously, their main thing is shipping and distribution, and they also have all of these entertainment branches, these arms. They seem to be trying to approach games in the same way that they approach other mediums, which just does not work. It does not work because games don't work like any other industry, really. So here's our first problem. Our first rookie mistake. Proprietary dev tools. Now, in some cases, you are going to need to build your own engine. You are going to need to make all of these resources for you to make your game. But you usually see that with either extremely ambitious games where there is not, they really want a targeted engine that is going to help them do what they want. Otherwise, usually just use a pretty all-purpose engine like Unity or Unreal, or even a few others that are available to license. Building your own proprietary dev tools is a time, money, and energy investment that you are basically spending not making games. This is a problem that that almost killed a lot of small and mid-sized Japanese developers in around the mid 2000s to 2010s. This is a great case study. Around that time, possibly definitely due to the success of the Xbox, but also many other factors, the Western market took suddenly got a large share of the market. That basically took away from the Japanese side of the industry. This caused a lot of panic and a lot of DMC Devil May Crying. And it was kind of just a generally rough period for a lot of Japanese developers. In Japan, they have this kind of devotion to this idea of not all companies, of course, but it does exist this mindset of, if it was not of the not developed here, if it was not developed in Japan, we don't want to use it. If it was not developed by us, we don't want to use it. And now this worked in the previous generations, especially when Japan was kind of the top dog in the industry. But now that Western developers and were creating engines that were now rivaling what Japan was putting out, they needed to adapt, and they refused to. And this led to a lot of jank, a lot of disappointing products, until basically the widespread. This was all solved. I'm sure a lot of developed studios went out of business or got very close to going out of business, and this was resolved when, with the widespread adoption of Unreal Engine 4. Just screw it. It's a flexible, great engine. It works for everything we want to do most of the time. We'll just use Unreal. We'll just use it. And that's when you see, at that point, you start to see in the 8th console generation, all of these small and mid-sized developers finally start to kind of make a comeback and make a resurgence. Amazon is making the exact same mistake that they were making initially, with believing that, and this is of course softened because they have Amazon money to throw at it, but believing that they need everything to be proprietary, they need to develop everything in-house, has basically led to the development of Lumberyard. And if you talk to anyone who actually works at AGS, you will find out that Lumberyard is a steaming heap of garbage. Supposedly, apparently, it is some modified form of the Crytek engine, CryEngine, but it is horribly inefficient, difficult to work with. They say in the article, while they were waiting for code to compile, they would go watch TV or play Halo. They just had to wait on this stuff to load. So now on top of the time you're spending just building these tools, you're also waiting for them to just function. So a lot of wasted time and energy that could be going towards actually making a product or doing anything at all. This sort of inefficient, ineffective development pipeline has basically led to Amazon putting out zero. I was going to say something, and then I was going to say negative, and then I realized it was zero, because you might have missed the story. It just kind of flew by about a year ago, maybe a little less. Amazon has actually released 2 games. I don't remember what the other one is called. One of them was called, they both met the same fate, and one of them was called Crucible. Crucible was a hero shooter, which was released in like 2020. Released was such a massive flop that they unreleased it. Like, they took it off. They cyberpunked it. Before cyberpunking was even a thing. That is the results of all of their endeavors and all of their money. An unreleased a how would you even call that? Tags. Reverse birth. Don't look that up. Crucible segues perfectly into the next point, because Crucible was a hero shooter. Released like last year. And if that sounds silly to you, you already have a better understanding of the industry than Amazon executive Mike Frazzini seems to. So, next big problem that they've got is a general trend chasing. Amazon, from this article, seems to be largely metrics driven. Entirely by the numbers that the accountants pull up. With a bit of a caveat, trend chasing works if the idea is the initial idea is solid enough that it can be iterated upon in interesting ways, like you might say with the rush of fighting games, basically inventing a new genre. Trend chasing does not work with things like online competitive games, which is everything that Amazon is interested in putting out, because those are the games that the accountants pull up the sheet, and that's the one that makes the most money. Overwatch makes a lot of money. It's big on Twitch. It used to be. We'll just make another Overwatch. Trend chasing is an interesting it's an interesting phenomenon, because most things that people consider trend chasing tend not to be. You see, for instance, let's take Overwatch as a great example. Overwatch is a hero shooter, and I think that its inception is due in equal parts, in my opinion at least, to both TF2 and MOBAs. But I'll focus on TF2. So what you'll see, if you track the history and you have a basic idea of about how long each of these games takes to develop, you'll have a first game that has an idea. It's got a concept that's promising, and it causes this ground swell that leads a few years down the line to multiple games inspired by it releasing. One of them will inevitably release first, and the other one will usually be called a rip-off or just a trend chaser, trying to cash in on the trend. So Overwatch, let's just, for the sake of argument, for the simplicity of the argument, Overwatch is inspired by TF2. Lawbreakers, I know it's Lawbreakers, but it comes out at the same, a little later, I think, in the same genre, but it's a year later. They were in development at the same time. They didn't know. Lawbreakers was not just slapped together. There was a good couple years of development put into it. It just so happened that on top of a number of other things, a number of other reasons for its failure, it just happened to release close enough to Overwatch and was not compelling enough to draw people away from Overwatch. Another great example would be MOBAs. You have that initial game, Defense of the Ancients, that not as many people played, that has a bit more of more of a niche market, especially because this is a mod for a game, but it causes that groundswell, these ripples that lead to League of Legends and Dota 2. Those games are, sometimes called, at least earlier in their lifespans, they were kind of called rip-offs of each other. Usually by people who didn't know their history. Trend chasing is usually not what it appears to be. It's usually just one game serves as the inspiration for multiple people, and one game and another game, the product of that inspiration just so happens to come out before a different one. AGS does not seem to understand this because they think that if a game is making money now, it means that if we make another game like it, they basically think that it works like movies, when that's not at all how people play games. See, with movies, you can only watch a movie or a TV show so many times before you're just done with it. You still like it, but you're just done with it. And therefore, you move on to things that are like that. You discover, oh, I really like this horror movie. I'm going to go seek out a bunch of more horror movies now that I'm done with it. Games don't really work like that. Online games don't work like that. People tend to pick a game, get invested in it, learn all, because these games tend to be so complex so that they can have long lifespans, get invested in it, play with their friends, and then by that point, their roots are in. You rarely see a mass market exodus from one online game to another, because usually people, unless it's over the course of years, like 10 years of development, or of people just getting like sick of one game. This brings us to the one game that AGS is actually due to release in 2021. This year, guys, it's happening. It's called New World. It is an MMO. That is not a joke. They are releasing an MMO in 2021. Again, it's this a bean counter pulled up a sheet that said World of Warcraft makes this much money. FF14 makes this much money every month based off of subscriptions or in-game purchases or whatever. If we just make one of those, then that's just a free money generator. Not understanding that all of the issues I described with other online games are even more so for MMOs, because MMOs are such time sinks. And usually people play them for social reasons, so they play them with their friends. There's a lot of people who only play MMOs because every weekend they get together with their pals and they do a raid together, or they're part of a guild, or this is how they meet their friends. So if I'm a WoW player or an FF14 player, and FF14 is still getting expansions, and WoW is still getting expansions, and I have these games with years and years of development time and endgame content, and my friends are already playing it, why then would I move suddenly to New World, which is a new game that is from a studio that has never put out a game before, really, technically, that none of my friends are playing? There's just no incentive for the customer to actually change what they're doing, especially if they're already happy with what they're playing. As well, it's this kind of weird behavior that is specific. MMOs were the worst choice they could have picked. The worst choice of game to go into. Because a lot of people, this is like a weird specific behavior. They play one MMO, and then when they quit, they're just done. They're just kind of done with the whole genre. Sometimes they move on. There's a portion of people who, of course, go to other games, migrate, But there's a lot of people, especially like hardcore fans of specific games, who they quit WoW and they're never touching an MMO again. This is advice. I'm not some kind of like genius consultant. This is not like, I did not go to like Mount Sinai and talk to God and come down and say, hold up these stone tablets and say, MMOs are, a new MMO will not be profitable in 2021. This is just like common sense. This is having your finger on even the faintest pulse of the industry. Speaking of consultation, I neglected to mention, this is kind of funny. This isn't necessarily a rookie mistake. It's just like a regular mistake. Actually, maybe like an extreme mistake. So, New World, you might have been able to glean from the title. New World is an MMO set in an alternate history 1600s era America, where the player character is a colonist. And at least in the original design of the game, this was apparently changed quite a ways into development. The villains of the game were indigenous native peoples. I'm serious, like I couldn't make this up. The original code name, code name for the project was Roanoke, which, if you don't know, was the first British colony in the Americas. So they knew that much, and yet they were somehow not aware that this might be considered racist. I'm going to quote from the article. Executives under Frazzini initially rejected charges that New World, an Amazon game that would ask players to colonize a mythical land and murder inhabitants who bear a striking resemblance to Native Americans, was racist. When developers at Amazon pointed out to Frazzini's deputy, Patrick Gilmore, that the setting and villains could be considered racist, he expressed disbelief, according to two people who worked there. They only made the decision to change this after, quote, Amazon hired a tribal consultant who found that the portrayal was indeed offensive. This is the point where it starts to feel like this is all a big practical joke by Amazon, or like, is Jeff Bezos is he just messing with Mike Frazzini? Does he just want him to fail? And if we're talking about isms, apparently, let's see if I can find the quote right here. 4 female developers say their worst experiences of sexism in the industry were at Amazon. Like, come on, guys. How hard is it to not be sexist? Are you serious? I get that, like, some perspectives can be skewed. Some prior companies that you've worked at before can be more or less sexist. I'm sure it exists in some form. But, like, to be the worst? Ooh, come on, guys. It just seems like a total hell show, you know? Like, the entire idea to make an MMO. It's like, one of the reasons that trend chasing doesn't work in games is that by the time that when the time comes to even like chase the trend, because of the period that games take to develop, the market's moved on. Like, Fortnite got in early enough that they just caught lightning in a bottle. Look at every other battle royales seem like they're everywhere, but when you really look at it, it's like, what is there? Okay, there was PUBG. Well, you have really early ideas like, again, going back to this idea, you have early ideas like the culling, then PUBG, which is a mod, then Fortnite kind of adds this mode on a whim. It ends up becoming huge because it's really accessible, and that's kind of the main ones. You have a couple who managed to slip in there. You have the COD Warzone, which I think has been successful because it's Call of Duty, and apparently came from one of the better ones in recent years. I don't know. I don't play COD, but that's what I've heard. And there was the doesn't Fallout 76 have a battle royale? Pretty sure those are like the only ones that are successful. It seems like it's everywhere. That's really mostly just a couple big name games. For the most part, like, I was reminded of Radical Heights today. Do you remember Radical Heights? Do you remember the Culling 2? Probably not, because the market's moved on. People don't want to get invested in another Fortnite. They have Fortnite. Find something else. Do something on your own. Do something that's tried and true, like just a single player game. I'll get to that later. But the market has moved on. It seems like no one who's working at AGS has any experience in the games industry, or they it seems like they don't know their history at all. Speaking of, here's another funny thing. Apparently they hosted, if you want to talk about marketing, here's another great rookie mistake. Believing that you can market games like you can market any other medium, which you can't. Games are above any other industry, probably thrive the most off of word of mouth. A lot of gamers used the internet, and so talking about games on the internet, there was a foundation for it. Therefore, that kind of grew and developed and blossomed into the current landscape of, I found out about this game from a YouTuber. I feel like, Minecraft is the biggest game in the world because of YouTube. Among Us just completely blew up out of nowhere. Like a 2-year-old game suddenly gets big enough that the developers stop working on the sequel, and all because it got big on Twitch because someone played it on a whim. This like word of mouth marketing means that the most successful games tend to be like the successfully marketed games tend to be ones that just show off the game, because you show off the game, get people interested in it, and then when they're a streamer or a YouTuber or whoever on Twitter endorses it by basically being genuinely enjoying it, that's your marketing. That's the rest of your marketing. Of course, a lot more is spent on marketing, but the wildfire effect of word of mouth streaming and content creation is one of the most important parts of the games industry, and it's part of what makes it so unpredictable. Amazon was trying to market their games like movies or books. They did apparently some kind of like a demo of Crucible or whatever. I'm going to be itching my nose a lot. They did some kind of a demo of Crucible with Kevin Smith, and they were trying to do one with The Rock, and The Rock turned them down. The Rock turned down Amazon. How worthless is your strategy that you can be Amazon and get turned down? But the truth is that celebrities just can't market video games. They can't do it because that's not really who a lot of people like. I buy that Michael Jordan eats McDonald's every once in a while. I can buy that. I wouldn't believe Michael Jordan touched NBA Jam for more than 20 minutes, or it's at least harder to believe. However, my favorite headset-wearing streamer, well, yeah, obviously they play games, so if they like a game, oh. And honestly, that's how I have actually made several purchases of newer games in the past. It's because someone whose opinion I respected on a podcast or a stream said that they liked a game, and I was like, yeah, without even really looking at much more into the game, that I had previously never had games that I'd previously not had an interest in. Amazon's problems, the Amazon Game Studios problems, seem to just be a total lack of understanding of the way that people play games, the way that the market operates, the way that game development works in the first place, and really a total ignorance of history. There doesn't seem to be any consultant who actually knows anything about good like case studies from the games industry of stuff that did work out, stuff that didn't work out. To quote the battle theme of Persona 4, they miss their history, yet they fight over their place in it. Which I think describes this situation pretty well. They want to be a giant, but their own hubris and ego, maybe just Mike Frazzini's ego, is getting in the way of making any kind of quality product. The right way to approach this, if you want to make your own brand, so that can eventually become big on Twitch, and this just seems like common sense, buy like 5 studios with your Amazon money, tell them, make some single-player games. Just make a couple single-player games. We'll fund as much as you need, but you've got a deadline, but we'll give you the money. Just form the foundation. Basically, do the exact same thing that they did with their Prime Original series. Form a foundation of quality content that people are going to actually, it's going to give an incentive for them to actually pay for your service or to pay for your product. It might reveal a serious problem in the upper management's impressions of video games as a whole. And the more that I think about it, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they don't think of games as an art form, but instead as kind of the old way of seeing them as just toys. Because I don't know how you can look at games as an art form and make all of these mistakes. Even just with it seems like a serious mindset problem. So until Amazon is able to actually wake up and realize that they're taking the complete wrong approach to games development, I don't foresee any successes for any of their original game projects in the future. Supposedly they have some kind of a game streaming service, but already, because they've lost so much goodwill, let's just say, from the people who even are aware of AGS's endeavors, I don't know if it'll be a success. I could be proven wrong. But then again, Stadia. Was Stadia just a bad execution of a good idea, or a bad idea and a bad execution? The execution was bad either way. Only time will tell. Maybe Amazon is going to be able to pull it off. Maybe they'll find the market. However, I don't know how great that would be for the industry. However, it will be really funny because Frazzini did not come up with their streaming service idea. That was someone else. So he can't do anything right. And I'm glad that he can't do anything right. Not for the people who have to work under him, but I hope that I hope he gets humbled, because he sounds super freaking annoying. Well, before this turns into me just shitting on Amazon executives, I'll be back sometime probably next week with a new video. Or maybe at the end of the week. If you've even been watching this long, thank you. Subscribe if you feel so inclined. And I might do more rant videos like this in the future. It was pretty fun. God. Bye-bye.